It is Saturday, April the 2nd, and this is Steve Williams acting on behalf of the Slate Valley Museum to interview Paul Labas, the owner and operator of a local slate quarry and mill. So, Paul, happy to meet you.
You too.
Now, maybe we can start off with a bit of family background and how your family got here in the first place.
Sure. Well, again, my name is Paul Labas. I am a third-generation slate maker. And it all started out years ago in the early 1900s, around, I believe it was 1906 or 1908. We've been trying to find that exact date when my grandfather actually came from Slovakia and my grandmother. Of course, they weren't married yet at the time, but when they came over from Slovakia, they both left the port of Bremen. And they did not know each other, although in Slovakia they lived approximately 4 miles away from each other in a small town called Jastrebi. And she was from a small town called Kievan. And when they came to the United States, of course, just looking for work and escaping the oppression that was over there going on in Europe, because everything that they made on their tiny little farm was taken away from them. So they were looking to better their life, as everybody tries to do, I think, going on through life. They came to the United States, the land of opportunity, to fulfill their dreams. My grandfather, searching for work, ended up being sent down to Pennsylvania and started working in the coal mines. My grandmother ended up knowing some friends that had already come to the new country, had come to Granville, New York, and lived right here on the site where this museum is built today, in the longhouses. As she was here for a couple of years, I believe it was 2 or 3 years, there was always a sense of trying to be with your own kind, your own people from the old country, and thus many of them settled in this area. As with my grandfather, he settled with a lot of people in Pennsylvania, in the Scranton area, and in the coal mining countries or area down there as well. He got word of an eligible maiden from his hometown area in Granville, New York. Well, he made tracks to Granville and got word that there was work up here as well in the slate quarries, a totally different thing. And he came to Granville, New York, and I think it was in 1909, I believe, that they were married and started raising their family here in Granville, New York. And they had 5 boys, 1 girl. As a matter of fact, my aunt was born in Slovakia, as she was the firstborn, the oldest of the family. My grandmother actually went back to Slovakia, and my Aunt Mary was born there, and then they again came back to the United States. I think a misconception of years ago and even today that people came from the old country, as they called it, Slovakia, and the Italians and the Polish and all the immigrants of this area that came to this area to work in the quarries, that they were actually working in quarries and they had this in their lineage and their background in their old lands. That's not true. They were peasant farmers. They were basically self-existing. They didn't really have to produce much. They were basically there to feed their families and to take care of their own. When times got so tough and hard that they wanted to get ahead in life, that's when they moved on. And to actually save up enough money to buy passage from Eastern Europe and leave the port of Bremen, where most of them came from, and to come to the New World, to even just search a job is unfathomable today.
And that must have been a real struggle.
I can't imagine.
Hands on enough money to do that.
I can't imagine it. My grandfather's, I've heard this story many times, how my grandfather's brother, his name was Mike, and he walked from Jastrebi to the port of Bremen and begged, stole, whatever he did to get to the port, and basically worked around the port, knowing nothing about anything, shipyards, anything like that. But people were willing to do anything to get ahead back then, and it was hard. It was hard, but they appreciated every single minute of it, and they knew that they were striving for a goal to better their lives, to come to the New World, to better their lives. It was hard labor all the way through their lives. And the only thing they had back then was each other and their religion. That's all they had. And they took whatever they had with them on their back, and they moved.
So they came through Ellis Island, I assume.
Yes. Yep. And from there, they dispersed as, there's jobs here, there's jobs here. Everybody went their own way.
How did your grandmother come to be here? Did she have family contacts already?
Yeah, and that's the way the whole immigration of people coming from Eastern Europe to the United States. It started with 1, then 2, then 5. Oh, I have a friend over there. I have a cousin there. And they would write letters back and forth, communicate whatever way that they could. And, well, if I go, can I stay with your brother? Can I stay with your aunt, with your uncle? Of course. And then years ago, again, where this building is standing today, people would take in boarders. And that's how they would make money. They would take in boarders from Europe, cousins, aunts, uncles. Okay, you could stay with us until they would call it back then, give them a grub stake to start them out. And then they would find them work in their quarries. Many times they would go, I know for a fact that my grandfather talked to his boss at one time to promise a job. And he actually helped buy a job from his own boss to get his brother to come from Europe to go to work. Imagine paying a boss for a job for your brother who was not even here yet. And but back then, that's the way things happened. That's the way it happened.
My own history is a little bit weak on that period in Europe. Was this the Austro-Hungarian Empire that they were part of that?
Yes.
And for some reason, was this wealthy landlords that sort of oppressed the heck out of everybody else?
That's basically what it was. And whatever they could make and to raise on their tiny little plot of land on their farm, that's all they were, was farmers. Like I say, they would have, if they had a good yielding crop, the government would come in, take whatever they wanted, and leave whatever was left over for the people. So it was a very tough life, very tough life. And I think back of the way it was must have been working for them in the quarries, and the stories that I've heard in the quarries even back then at that time, although that was very, very hard work and very intensive and, 10, 12-hour days, 6 days a week, to them, that was a dream come true compared to what they had. So I guess they considered it, they bettered themselves.
Yeah, do you know which quarry your grandfather worked in first?
When my grandfather came, originally, like I said, he started working the coal mines. When he came to Granville, New York, he did have a brother that was working here in the quarries at one time. Excuse me, I say a brother, it was a cousin. And they worked for the Norton Brothers Slate Company at that time. And it was up on the Briar Hill, which is basically up and back of me, right along the Vermont-New York border. And they owned a stretch of quarries from West Pollock down straight through the vein right into close to Lake St. Catherine. And as you can see today on the maps, it's all basically right in one big line. And back then there was, I believe, like 3 major companies. I think you had Rising Nelson Slate Company, Norton Brothers Slate Company, and Hugh G. Williams Slate Company. And again, there was severe competition back then, because there's 3 parts of this business. There's mining, there's milling, and there's sales. Years ago, companies did all 3. They would mine it, they would mill it, and they would sell it. Well, when you're in competition with your next door neighbor, literally, which is, 200 yards down the street, the price cuts could get brutal. And consequently, what they do to cut costs, as what most businesses do, they pass that cost cutting down to the lowest end of the table, and it's usually the employees that suffer on that. And the working conditions were horrible. There was, long, grueling days, cold, rainy days. It didn't matter. You worked no matter what. They had to. They had nothing else.
And I guess safety must have been pretty loose, I suspect, in those times.
Safety was non-existent. There was many stories back then of men getting killed in the quarries, men being blown up, buried alive, cut, hurt, maimed, smashed, dumped out of rubbish boxes, caught into cable systems, trampled by horses, you name it, burned by steam engines, steam lines exploding. But back then, there was no workman's compensation. no Social Security disability. If you wiped out, or you were killed in the mine, or you were killed or broke a leg or lost your arm or your leg, there was 10 men standing in line to take your job.
Now, tell me, what's the federal organisation that looks after mine safety now? What's its name?
MSHA, Mine Safety Health Administration.
Okay. So when did that get started? You know?
I believe it was in the early 70s.
Oh, so
yes.
that's comparatively
Relatively new.
recent then.
Yeah.
So this sort of carnage, if that's the right word, sort of went on until then.
Well, as again, back then there wasn't much of a control. It was, I compared it to the Wild Wild West. You did whatever you had to do to get ahead. And whoever stood in your way, you got rid of your competition. When it became regulated and the safety of things came about into the slate quarry businesses, yes, it made things a lot safer. And granted, nowadays, to work in the quarries, as far as the actual manufacturing of the product, it hasn't changed. Every piece of stone is still hand split. And every piece of stone is still put on a trimming machine, taken off the trimming machine, put onto a pallet, and it's all hand labor. Many people don't understand that this stuff is a mass-produced product, that we're just chewing through the earth and mowing things down and tearing up trees and doing whatever. It's not true. If anybody is more of a conservationist of property and how to treat the land right, ask some of the slate owners in this valley, Sheldon Slate Company, Greenstone Slate Company. These guys are protecting their resource, and they want it to survive, and they want it to last because it's their main family source of income. So it's not being exploited in any way, and the employees that work at these quarries nowadays are miles ahead safer than they were years ago.
Well, I was in the design of the equipment has improved.
Much of the equipment, yes. Years ago, things were run by cable and steam winches. Then it turned over to electricity winches, and that was dangerous because many of the operators of the drum and cable hoists and winches never saw the pitmen down in the pit. Everything was done by a motion boy who stood on the edge of the pit making motion, blocks, no blocks, anything like that. And that's how they communicated. Well, if you have a 3-ton carriage going down 175 feet into a quarry that you're not even looking at, and you're counting on this young guy standing on the edge of a pit, just looking over the edge, and he doesn't have any communication, only hand signals down there. I guess maybe that's where sign language came in, I don't know. But that was how they communicated. And nowadays it's truck and it's excavator, backup alarms, there's bells, it's horns, whistles. Roads, beautiful roadways are built down into the quarries with berms to protect any kind of runaway truck or anything like that. So, yes, the safety has improved dramatically, and especially when you get into the milling end of it, dust control. It was a horrible disease back then to die of. Back then, black lung, the silicosis that was affecting many of the people.
Okay, so ventilation is...
Ventilation. Slate has come a long ways since its inception in this valley. It's become more of a, not a necessity, but a, how do you want to say it, a novelty. And when you get things that are a novelty, it takes craftspeople to make that a novelty and to keep it maintained. And again, years and years and years ago, there wasn't much concern for the worker. It was all about the owner. Now it's going the other way. We're concerned about who we're working with. We want the good people. We want the quality product. Quality is key in this business, and we want to preserve what we have as not only a family tradition, but as also a valuable commodity for this area and for people to be employed in.
No, I think surely in terms of the Granville area, Granville, West Paulet, Castleton, Fairhaven, I mean, this is a significant part of the local economy.
It certainly is, and it's been part of the threads of the quilt that's kept all these neighboring communities together. And I've been here my whole life, I'm almost 50 years old now, and it's like you can go from quarry to quarry to quarry, and it's sometimes funny to see, well, gee, that guy used to work for me last year. Well, now he's working at this quarry or this quarry. So again, once these guys that are employed in the slate business, they have that built-in skill and knowledge. A lot of them will leave, but I've seen a lot of them come back. Even though it's very hard work, it's what they enjoy, and it's in their blood. And my father always told me that too. Once you get cut by the stone, it's in your blood. You're infected with it. You're not going to walk away.
So you're running your quarry on the Switch Road in Westport with your brother Mike, I
Correct.
understand.
Correct.
And did your father have that too?
Yes. During the Great Depression, the whole slate industry in this valley pretty much shut down. There was thousands of people out of work. And one of the big things that they did back in that time in this area was, there's still a lot of them left in Granville, but a lot of them are breaking up and getting dug up, replaced with concrete, is the slate stone sidewalks that are in this valley. Now, to make a sidewalk that's 2 inches thick, and some of these sidewalks, you measure them and they're some 10 feet long, 4 foot wide, by hand, and hand trim them, that's quite a feat. That's quite a feat. So it would take a lot of men to do that. But they were put into work in these quarries, and these guys would go up and they would work, not making slate anymore, they were making sidewalks. So you'll see a lot of them still around the valley. The retaining walls along the Meadowy River down by the Little League fields and things such as that, those are all built during the WPA days. This beautiful artwork mural in back of me that you'll see by, I believe her name was Martha Levy. And, you know, people, again, these people were accustomed to being poor and starving. The Depression was nothing to them. They left something that was 10 times worse. They still grew up, they still ate. As a matter of fact, the Slovak people in this community, in this town, were able to scrimp and save and have enough money saved up. When the time came after the Depression started to let go of the grip of the country a little bit, a gentleman by the name of Hugh G. Williams wanted to reopen one of his quarries called the Big Quarry. And it was a quarry that my grandfather had worked in. And a lot of the Slovak people had worked in it. Well, he didn't have any money. He lost it all during the Depression. He still had the property. He had obtained a few orders and wanted to start back working. He came to the Slovak people down here in this alley of Granville and requested them, will you give me some money? I'll promise you a job. I want to get this quarry going, but I need to buy explosives. I need to buy tools. I need to buy all the necessities that it takes to mine a quarry, and I also need you to work it, to produce this.
This was mid-30s?
Yes, okay. Early 30s.
Yeah.
Well, the Slovak people, being trustworthy of anybody that came and asked for help, because that's what they did. They leaned on each other. They pooled their money together, and they chipped in, and again, my father bought my uncle a job. Okay, I'll give you, back then, $1,000? $1,000. I want to buy my job for $500, and I want to buy a job for my brother, too, at $500. Sure, I'll take it, you know. And they did that amongst the whole community. The Polish people did too. The Italians, they gave money too. Well, they started this quarry, and over the years, as slowly, they went 26 weeks without a paycheck.
Good Lord, and they'd already put a slug of money down to get in.
They put $500 to get in, and they worked half a year before they even got a paycheck. Now, mind you, back then, even my grandparents, they were able to scrimp and save what little money that they had to go and do such a thing, but to buy themselves a job and work half a year to get a measly bit of it back, $10 a week, $12 a week, to this day, a little extra money, my father used to tell me, they thought was put into their pay envelopes. They didn't know. They couldn't read or write. There was no loan signed. There was no credit report. There was no TRW run. There was nothing.
Everything was on trust.
Everything was on trust and a handshake. But as things went, the quarry started to turn around. Production came up. He was slowly paid the people back. And they actually teamed up together and threw this man a party. And they worshiped him as an owner because they considered him to be so good to them to employ them back, to get them working again. I think there is also a trophy that they awarded this man in this museum for doing that for them and their families.
It's a great story, isn't it?
It is. It's mind-boggling when you think about it.
Now, where was this quarry?
This quarry was right up on the Bullfrog Hollow Road, just on the right-hand side.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was shut down, I believe, on the onslaught of World War II. Again, all the quarries shut down.
Everything's collapsed.
Everything's collapsed again because all the men were gone in the town, in the village. They all got drafted. They were all sent to Europe. And ironically, I mean, my father, he was one of 5 brothers that they all got drafted and all sent, scattered all over the globe. But ironically, most of them were sent right back into the Eastern Europe, fighting in the area that their parents left to come to the United States for. And my Uncle Abe would write letters back to my grandmother in Granville saying, "Gee, Mom, here I am. Do you remember this place?" And, right down the main street of their home village.
What a story.
It's crazy. It's crazy. But it's ironic, but it's true. And I think, whatever goes around comes around. Yep.
So, in terms of the business, I think originally it was that roof slate. I guess you mentioned you've gone to sidewalk, paving. Have there been other things? Floor tiling, I guess we're right on floor tiling.
Yeah, after World War II, again, the men came back to town. What are we going to do? Well, let's start a quarry. Let's go back. Let's start working together and start up the quarries. The problem was when they started the quarries back up and they were making production, they couldn't sell their products anymore because along with the end of World War II there was many new materials, as with something that world life-changing did. No longer was slate a necessity. You had asphalt roof. You had metal roofing that was coming out. You had rubber roofs that were coming out. Everything was more affordable. Everything was easier to obtain. Things were being manufactured in large quantities, mass-produced, because all the factories in the United States were geared up in war production mode. And what do? They produced 5,000 tanks, and they did everything in bulk in huge, massive ways. Well, what do you do when you have all this machinery geared up to build war goods all this time? Well, you turn it around to make consumables for the people that are living, and prospering, coming back, starting families, and the baby boomers that started coming around. So, again, the quarries were at a demise where they shut down and very few in operation. What did they do then? They had to turn their heads around to think, well, gee, if roofing's not selling, let's try to make a floor out of it. Let's try to sell some for patio stone and things such as that. So it evolved into, and those were used as products. And again, as the industry has evolved, or as the time changed, the industry had nowhere to go but change with the times. And as with many industries, it's very hard to take a piece of stone and turn it into a dollar bill. It's almost like magic, but it's tough to sell it and to make it desirable for people to want. And thankfully today, in today's day and age, people appreciate it, and they're starting to look at not only the durability and the quality of the product that comes out of this area in Granville and Vermont and the whole Slate Valley as a whole, but the people that produce it. I mean, this stuff is in the hearts and the souls of the people that are producing this. It's not just a factory job where they go to work at GE or IBM. You know, the slate quarry industry is very small, generally run by, I think, about 12 or 15 families and family businesses now, that's supplying a very huge, large market. And again, still, it's very tight. There's very, very little profit in it.
Well, can you talk about marketing? You mentioned that, of course, is one part of the whole business. Now, how many of the quarries, you said there's 12 families, say,
Right.
in the business, how many of them are selling individually and how many are selling through Evergreen, who I understand to be the
Yep.
sort of
Evergreen,
consolidated?
there's a Greenstone Slate Company, Evergreen, Vermont Structural as well. Now, Evergreen Slate Company per se doesn't have like they don't do the mining, the milling, and the sales. They have been historically since 1916, I believe. They were basically in the marketing end of the slate business. And during my heyday of the slate industry in the 80s and the 90s, late 80s and the early 90s, straight up through, they were the big dog on the street. There's no doubt about that. And they kept a lot of these small guys going. Myself, the smaller companies, Plisco Slate Company, and things like that. It was great because you could get a paycheck every single week. Again, this market is getting very tight and tightening up now to the point where you could sell every piece of slate that you made, and now it's basically we're cutting to order, and you have to sell what you make, and then whatever you don't sell, you end up putting it on the bank. That's really tough to do if you don't have your ducks in a row, because you're basically living off your inventory, whatever you can sell, whereas you can't afford to go out and buy new equipment and things such as that right away. You know, you have to time and piece everything out, and if you're not careful, you can fail quick. So marketing is a huge aspect of it, and again, it's being promoted, and rightfully so, as a very high quality product and a very hands-on product. Many people, as I traveled around the United States and the Northeast, where you'll see a lot of slate roofs in the more wealthier communities, are finally getting the idea of, gee, I have this beautiful Victorian home that was built in the 1800s. I guess I'm not going to tear that slate roof off and put an asphalt roof on. I mean, that makes my stomach turn when I go in some of these communities and see that done. Well, they'll actually call and say, gee, I didn't even know slate was being manufactured anymore. There's more people that don't know about slate than there is people that do. So,
Now, how about competition from outside the country? I mean, there are other slate manufacturers. Wales, of course, has been a big one.
Yep.
I think Spain is a big one.
Spain is a huge
and
one.
I understand that China is also significant.
Yep.
Can you comment on any of these?
Well, yes, the markets that have come in from the foreign markets that haven't, have put a big dent in our business as well. And again, we are competing against foreign markets all the time. The Chinese market was scary. It was really scary when they came on board and they started marketing slate. Reason being is there's no way that we could compete with the labor cost. When you were getting a square of slate delivered from China to the Port of Albany for about $30 or $40 less per square than we could manufacture in our own backyard, that was really scary. The only saving grace that we had was the quality of the stone was of a very poor quality, and it was a softer stone where they put this stuff on the roof. Yes, they were selling it dirt cheap, and there was a lot of people buying it and putting it out there. Well, they put it all over the country, and it only took about 10 years' time, and people came back to us and say, gee, we need to replace our slate roof because it's falling apart.
Okay. And, so that threat has maybe gone for the time being.
Yes, I think that market is diminishing, and unless they hit a very harder vein, because again, the labor cost, the labor that they're working with over there now is being treated like the labor was being treated here in the early 20s, in 1900s. So there's no way that you could compete with something like that. And when you're dealing with a labor-intensive product, that's your big cost, and it's all hands-on. The Spanish black is very beautiful quality stone, very nice stuff. That's a very deep, dark black and things like that. So the market is, I would say, challenged. I would say that the quality of the product that comes out of this valley is bar none the best in the world. Not because I'm just part of it, but it's true, and it's proven itself over the test of time. I mean, you can walk around this village itself and see houses that were built in the 1850s and still have their original roof on them. And the European market is becoming strong for us because a lot of the quarries in Wales, northern Wales, Penrhyn quarries are shut down. So where do they get their product? They're getting it from us. We're starting to ship back into Europe.
Back to Europe.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
now, in terms of slate roofs, is it, say, college buildings? Is it institutional buildings? Is it people are building mansions with X thousand square feet? They decide they want to have a slate roof, or a mixture of all of these?
Well, a lot of your federal buildings that are built to last, the institutions of the world, the big, powerful, whatever you want to call it, there's a lot of them that specify, slate roof. And some of them will even specify certain quarries that they want it to come from the valley that the building was originally made of. I mean, when 9/11 hit, of course, the whole country was devastated. Who could do such a thing to America? Why? And this tiny little town of Granville, all of a sudden there was a phone call. Well, one of the planes that went into the Pentagon, the roof itself came from this little tiny area. Well, what a sense of pride to be able to, go to work and actually feel like you're to provide that piece of slate, and Evergreen Slate Company was a big part of that, and it was a sense of pride as well as it is now today. And again, like I say, it's part of the soul. It's what you do, and to be able to bring that pleasure back, to say, yeah, that's what we do.
Well, Paul, that sounds really great, the resume you've given us and the broad touching. Just before we close, is there anything else you'd like to tell the visitors to the Slate Valley Museum?
I wish that everybody would come and see what a tiny treasure that we have here. It's definitely a gem, and it's a hidden gem. And come around and talk to some of the slate quarry operators and owners. And there isn't anybody that doesn't like to show off the things that they have. And to us, it's a shining example of a business that's been kept and maintained by hard work and dedication, perseverance, and truthfulness to each other. We don't have much competition, with the rest of the world nobody does when you're the best. Well, when you're the best, you end up bringing a lot of friends with you. And again, we try to protect what we have. We strive to make it safe, environmentally correct, and to keep it going for longevity and for future generations to come.
Well, Paul, that was great. Let me wish you all success in your continued activities in the slate industry. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Very good.